So we have the ability to change the world. And in the next 10 minutes, we're going to do just that. The most important word in that sentence is we. Look around us. What do we see? A world that's in financial, social, environmental crisis. A world where each day more than 40,000 people die because of lack of access to the basic necessities: food, shelter, and water. Yet on the other side of the world, we consume, we waste, and in our haste to consume, we've destroyed a third of the world's natural resources. What's wrong with the world is that there's a shortage of sharing. So let's imagine a world where we are sharing skills, time, talent, opportunities, resources, goods, services, ideas, responsibility. We all have sharing potential. So isn't it time that we maximised it? Let's imagine a world where instead of buying things that we don't need, that we throw away, we share. Let's imagine a world where instead of sending mountains of perfectly good food to landfill, we share it with those who are living in food poverty. Let's imagine a world where instead of believing that we need to own everything and everything needs to be new, that we bought things just when we needed them, and when we didn't need them, other people could use them. Let's imagine a world where businesses share and collaborate, where businesses themselves are built around the sharing of resources, where we don't sell the message, buy more, we sell the message, share more. Because the more we share, the more we have. But the problem is, we've forgotten how to share, and that's why the world is in the mess that it's in. So let's rewind to childhood. Let's find that child who learned how to share, because we did learn how to share. So that's me and my brother. I didn't want to share, and certainly not with him. As my parents would testify, we fought like hell. But somehow, kicking and screaming, we learned how to share. You see, learning to share is the most important lesson we'll ever learn. It's the most important lesson we'll teach our children, because the more you share, the more you have. But it's not easy to share, is it? Right? That's why we get 99% and 1%. That's why life expectancy in some of the poorest countries is 50 years less than in some of the wealthiest. You see, this shortage of sharing isn't good for anybody. When we don't share responsibility, we get climate change. When we don't share resources and opportunities, we get poverty. When we don't share time, a conversation, a smile, we end up isolated, disconnected, and miserable. How can we get to know our neighbours if we don't share? So we need to remember how we learned to share. We need to remember what it was that made us realise that we needed to share, so that we can unleash our collective sharing potential and change the world as we know it. So the reason we learn to share is actually quite simple. As we grew up, we learned that if we didn't want to be alone, if we wanted to have friends, we needed to share. We learned that sharing was a way to get the things that we wanted. We learned that if we wanted to play with a toy that someone else had, we had to share something of ours. We learned that it's much more fun to share. We learned that sharing is what makes us human. And by the time we were teenagers, we'd learned that the more we share, the more we have. But some of us don't remember how to share, do we? Some of us don't want to share. Some of us think that sharing is a load of hippy-dippy, idealistic claptrap. Some of us want to keep things just the way they are because we don't want to give up what we have. Some of us don't trust others. Some of us think that if we share our belongings, our homes, our ideas with other people, they'll take them, they'll destroy them. Some of us are afraid. Some of us have forgotten how. Well, I've got news for you. Every single person listening to this has the power to change the world through sharing. Sharing is the simple solution to our most complex global problems. Because who shares wins. So let's find the sharer inside all of us and grow up sharing. There's a new economy emerging. It's called the sharing economy. It's changing the way that we think, that we live, and we do business. It's the future economy. Now, maths wasn't my strong point when I was at school, but it doesn't take a maths genius to realize we have a planet with finite resources, and we have a growing population. We are going to need to share to survive. So we better go back and find that child within, that child who knows how to share, that child that knows that the more you share, the more you have, that child that knows that sharing makes you happier. Apparently, 8 out of 10 of us say sharing does make us happier. So that child that knows that sometimes, even though it's really hard to share, we're all better off if we do. It's by unleashing this child in all of us, by remembering how to share, that we'll build this sharing economy. You see, in a sharing economy, people are more important than product. Access is more important than ownership. The means of production and distribution are shared, are co-created. We share the life cycle of our belongings. We swap or swish clothes. We house swap. Now, my family swapped homes this summer for a farmhouse in Italy. It was beautiful. If we'd have rented it, it would have cost us €3,000 a week. But we didn't. We swapped our empty home in Brighton, in England, for a beautiful farmhouse in Italy. We used what we had to get what we needed. Not only did we have the best local recommendations, the best places to take the children, but when we returned home, there was flowers on the table, fruit in the fruit bowl, a bottle of wine, a welcoming note. You see, the more we have, the more we share, the more we have. But it's not just the sharing child in each of us that we need to find. If we go back through the childhood of our humanity, we've been sharing for more than 2 million years. We have survived through sharing. And if you think about it, wartime is a really good example of that. Now, many people over the age of 60 grew up with sharing in the community. In 1950, sharing was commonplace. Sharing is what you did. Out of sugar? Ask a neighbour. Need a hammer? Pop across the street. Sharing was everywhere. Sharing was what you did. But by the late 80s, we'd forgotten how to share. Apparently, 1/3 of us in the West don't even know our neighbours' names. If you don't know your neighbour, you're less likely to look out for them, and they are less likely to look out for you. You see, a shortage of sharing isn't good for anyone. A shortage of sharing leads to unemployment, poverty, illness, death, the destruction of our planet. But each one of us has the power to change the world, one small sharing step at a time. So go back. Find that child within and remember how to share. It won't be easy at first, but the consequences of not sharing are all around us. So be smart. Because sharing is about using the things that you have to get the things that you need. Sharing is about saving money and making money. It's about making the most of our assets. Some people make £16,000 a year by renting out their spare room. Well, that's sharing. They're sharing their space. They're sharing their resource. We can all do that, right? Sharing is about putting the £1.6 trillion worth of unused items in all of our homes to good use. Sharing is a way to do more with less. It's about being smarter, about living smarter. I save £20,000 a year through sharing. You could too. There are a multitude of places, online and on land, where you can share, from free cycling to couch surfing, compareandshare.com, which is a marketplace of the sharing economy, to the mesh. You can swap and exchange clothes. There are many places that you can share. Look around your offices. What could you share? Do you have space that you're not using that someone else might? Do you have equipment that's lying around that someone else might need? The smartest entrepreneurs are building their businesses around the sharing of resources. We're seeing the rise of these sharing businesses, and we're starting to swap and lend and exchange, just like our grandparents did, but it's happening faster using technology, online, on land, and on the go. Now, we can share everywhere. We just have to remember how to do it. Because if we continue as we are on a road to nowhere. Once we've demolished the house, there'll be nowhere left to shelter. So we make a decision. Make a decision to remember how to share. However scary it might feel at first, not to have new, not to have the so-called best. I started by putting on clothes swapping parties and inviting friends over to share and swap clothes they didn't want anymore. Take a small step, share one thing. And aside from all the money you'll save, it's so much more fun. Even if you've forgotten how to share, go back and learn that most important lesson of your life. See, this sharing economy, it isn't a fantasy. It's real and it's happening. I've made it my business to build a sharing economy. And right now, there are major high street retailers out there where you can bring in unwanted clothing to their stores. So the sharing economy is where we're heading. And the most exciting thing is that we are all part of this. We are making history. If we fast forward 10 years from now, we'll look back on 2012 and we'll say, this was the year that the sharing economy started to take hold. This was the year that we started relearning how to share. And this, right here, right now, was the moment that you realized you had the power to change the world through sharing. The moment that you remembered how to share. So let's eliminate this shortage of sharing, and with it, the financial gap, the social gap, the generation gap, the future gap. Remember that sharing is the only resource that's unlimited. The more we share, the more we have. And once we've woken up to that, once we've remembered how, we create the future. Because as human beings, we live better together. You see, in our hearts, we are all people who share. Thank you for sharing.